So I found a formula for decision making in what is basically this ancient samurai manual for life. And why do I think this is so valuable? Well, how much time do you suppose you spend overthinking? If you're like me, it's probably a lot. And what do you think is the impact of too much hesitation, missed opportunities, unmet ambitions, lingering bad habits? For me, it's probably all of the above. And what I really love about this book is I used to think that samurai were just masters of fighting and warfare. But more and more, I'm realizing that in order to become the apex warriors that they were, they needed to possess the mental keys to discipline, power, confidence, self-control, even mastery over their own emotions. I'm reading from Hagakure, which is definitely one of the most profound books ever written about the way of the samurai. And I'm only now approaching the end of the first chapter, and I'm already beginning to understand why for the last 300 years this book has become so popular among the highest achievers in the world, like athletes and business people and military people, world leaders, because this book possesses what I think is some really refined wisdom about self-mastery. So in this reading, we're going to talk about why hesitation is probably one of the biggest hindrances to success for most people, how the samurai developed this ability to never waver under immense pressure, and we're going to talk about how some of these ancient lessons can be applied to challenges and goals that we face in our modern day life. Oh, and I also found some really surprising insight on how samurai handle failure, and it is the total opposite of how we think about failure today. So stick around. In the words of the ancients, one should make his decisions within the space of 7 breaths. Lord Takanobu said, if discrimination is long, it will spoil. Lord Naoshige said, when matters are done leisurely, 7 out of 10 will turn out badly. A warrior is a person who does things quickly. When your mind is going hither and thither, discrimination will never be brought to a conclusion. With an intense, fresh, and undelaying spirit, one will make his judgments within the space of 7 breaths. It is a matter of being determined and having the spirit to break right through to the other side. That is so nice. Okay, so let's talk about, I'm so excited. So when I said this is a formula, everything about this is literally formulaic. Obviously because he's talking about 7 breaths, right? So he's giving you this window, and I don't think it's literal, but hey, maybe. Since I found this a few days ago, I've literally been counting my own breaths before making a decision, before replying to a message or something. Like, my tendency would normally be to, if it's a question I don't really want to deal with or just something I don't want to handle right now, I'll just put it off. I'll just go answer them later or something like that. But I found myself going, no, count 7 breaths. And the truth is, I already knew what my answer was because I only have 7 breaths. It's like, well, here we are, we're at breath 6 and my mind hasn't changed. So I guess it's the thing I was thinking anyway, and there you go. So I think that's probably at the root of it, which is about intuition, connecting to your intuition, even though it's never really said here. But what I also like is Lord Naoshige, who said that when matters are done leisurely, 7 out of 10 will turn out badly. So he has done a survey, and he's worked out that 70% of leisurely decision making and that kind of thing ends badly or turns out badly. And I mean, I don't think he literally did a survey, but I like how sure they are about this. And this is again at the root of this thing. It's about clarity, certainty, confidence. I mean, just think about the level of confidence that you have to develop in order to make a decision within the space of 7 breaths. Like, go ahead and count 7 breaths right now. It's not a lot of time. And this is funny because I'm about to say that I think this should be done with moderation and a degree of discrimination. And as I look down, I see the word discrimination. He says, when your mind is going hither and thither, discrimination will never be brought to a conclusion. And boy, if that ain't the truth. I mean, analysis paralysis, right? We call it today. And maybe, in all fairness, very big decisions in your life, probably you need more than 7 breaths. More than likely. I think it would be okay in certain cases if you take a day or something to make a really, really, really big decision, especially if you have to do research and that kind of thing. But generally speaking, I think most of the decisions that we are met with in a day-to-day basis can be solved just like that. And actually, when you think about it from that angle, 7 breaths is a lot of time. What do you want for breakfast? You shouldn't need 7 breaths to figure that out. What do you need to wear today or tomorrow or whatever, or what, I don't know. Who cares? Just do it, you know? And I could already feel how just applying that type of approach instantly frees up the mind. It feels like relief to think about that I could take the strain off of my brain by making most decisions very quickly. But also I could see this having a huge impact on overall life, because a lot of people get very busy. Certainly when I'm thinking about my own life, it's probably because I fail to make quicker decisions. Like, there's probably a bunch of things that can be decided and dealt with very, very quickly that I've just left till later, and that stuff has just piled up, and now I barely have time to do important things because so many smaller things have been left undealt with. Here's another one. It is bad when one thing becomes 2. One should not look for anything else in the way of the samurai. It is the same for anything else that is called a way. Therefore, it is inconsistent to hear something of the way of Confucius or the way of the Buddha and say that this is the way of the samurai. If one understands things in this manner, he should be able to hear about all ways and be more and more in accord with his own. Above all, one should not divide one's way into 2. One should strive in the way of the samurai. Another beautiful gem. And can we do a quick praise break for Yamamoto's poetry? I just love how pure and melodic his writing is. He always just delivers the message with such clarity and sophistication, and with a little air, a little lilt of something beautiful, and I really appreciate that about him. But yeah, I love this. It is bad when one thing becomes 2. I mean, it's clear now that the samurai were masters of focus, but I think this goes a little bit deeper. He talks about how there are other ways that you can hear about, the Confucius way or the way of the Buddha, and if you are situated rightly in your own way, the more you hear about other ways is the more in accord you become with your own, which is a sort of a counterintuitive idea, but I think it's a really treasured characteristic of a person who is able to entertain the ways and the livelihoods and the belief systems of other people and cultures, and appreciate it, and maybe find some beauty in it, but at the same time not leave behind your own core values. And I think that that's what's at the heart of what he's talking about here. And again, it's really just about this purity, that one way should not become 2. So if you are a samurai, don't be mixing up too many different things. Like, be a samurai, or be a Buddha, or be a Confucianist, or whatever it is, and be pure in your way, but not ignorant of other ways. Yeah, really, really cool. Uncle Yamamoto, a vibe. For sure. Here's another one. To be at odds with one's own companions, to be prone to miss even infrequent meetings, to speak only cantankerous words, all come from a shallow foolishness of mind. But thinking of the moment of truth, even though it be unpleasant, one should fix it in his mind to meet people cordially at all times and without distraction, and in a way which one will not seem bored. Moreover, in this world of uncertainties, one is not sure even of the present. It would be worthless to die while being thought ill of by people. Lies and insincerity are unbecoming. This is because they are a self-portrait. In other words, don't be an asshole. I think that's such a beautiful way of just saying, yo, don't be a dick to people, because you never know when you're gonna go, and the last thing you want is to be thought ill of by other people, or to be thought, oh my god, that guy was such a, and I don't think that he is he is proposing being a people pleaser by any means, but he's saying still seek to find this sense of cohesion and accord and just general good vibes with people around you. And this is another flash of what I think is such a charming and unexpected trait of the samurai, that more than just being masters of military technique, I think they were very emotional people. And I think they understood the value of brotherhood, of love, of loyalty, of good social cohesion, of manners, cordiality, and that this wasn't just for ceremony. This is one that I really love. When something out of the ordinary happens, it is ridiculous to say that it is a mystery or a portent of something to come. Eclipses of the sun and moon, comets, clouds that flutter like flags, snow in the 5th month, lightning in the 12th month, and so on. All are things that occur every 50 or 100 years. They occur according to the evolution of yin and yang. The fact that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west would be a mystery too, if it were not an everyday occurrence. Furthermore, the fact that something bad always happens in the world when strange phenomena occur is due to people seeing something like fluttering clouds and thinking that something is going to happen. The mystery is created in their minds. And by waiting for the disaster, it is from their very minds that it occurs. The occurrence of mysteries is always by word of mouth. Man. Yam easy. Boy. So, why I love this little section is, at first it appears to be a charming little insight into how at least Yamamoto and very likely his peers thought about things like coincidence and superstition, right? He dismisses even freak occurrences like snow in the 5th month and lightning in the 12th month, etc., etc. And he clearly doesn't think much about clouds that flutter like flags. I wonder if this was a common belief that people saw clouds fluttering like flags in the sky and thought this was an omen, a bad omen of something. But then it quickly turns to this wisdom about speech and the impact that speech and expectation and belief has on the physical world and your own consequences in life. He says very, very clearly that the fact that something bad always happens when some strange phenomena occur is due to people seeing something like fluttering clouds and thinking that something is going to happen. The mystery is created in their minds, and by waiting for the disaster, it is from their very minds that it occurs. The occurrence of mysteries is always by word of mouth. Man, again, Yamamoto just has that way of like buttoning it up at the end. There's actually been some research about the impact of collective superstition on real events, and the most classic is Friday the 13th. More accidents tend to occur on Friday the 13th, and people tend to have just more mishaps happening around Friday the 13th. And researchers have found that a lot of it is just because people create anxiety within themselves, and that just has a subconscious impact on how you operate. So on one level, you could dismiss it as superstition and say, well, there's no such thing as these coincidences and whatever. But on the other level, you could say, well, more than a superstition, there's a direct correlation. And I think Yamamoto is suggesting the same thing too. That ultimately, from your own mind, you can bring about harmony or you could bring about chaos. So this is what I found that was really surprising about how samurai deal with failure. It is unthinkable to be disturbed at something like being ordered to become a ronin. People at the time of Lord Katsushige used to say, if one has not been a ronin at least 7 times, he will not be a true retainer. 7 times down, 8 times up. Men like Narutomi Hyogo have been ronin 7 times. One should understand that this is something like being a self-writing doll. The master is also apt to give such orders as a test. That was really cool and to me surprising, because a ronin was basically a rogue samurai, essentially a samurai who got fired. And typically speaking, I know most people associate samurai with seppuku or harakiri, which when they are disgraced or they lose honor or they make some mistake or whatever, they immediately burst their guts open with their own sword, right? But here he's saying, at least in the case of becoming a ronin, that if you're not a ronin at least 7 times, if you ain't been fired at least 7 times, bro, then you're not gonna make a great retainer. It's funny because I've been fired, and actually I have found a great deal of value in that in the times where I have either been fired, which has not been many, but maybe once or twice, and I myself have become a ronin, which I think I kind of am right now, actually, in the modern sense, but without the sword. In those times, I mean, one, I learned a great deal of value. First, I learned that I can overcome the greatest shame or failure or whatever it is, which is being dismissed or fired or something, and that, hey, you can be okay. A lot of people live in such fear of this, and that causes them to stay in situations that are really unhealthy for them. I mean, I know I'm like, hey, it's okay if you, I don't mind getting fired. I mean, it sucks, but it's fine, you know? That's probably at the most basic level. But then it's also incredibly humbling because it reminds you that, hey, you are not indispensable. You can be dismissed. You can lose an opportunity. This thing that is happening right now can change. And I actually think it was a blessing to discover that for myself, because I remember having a very distinct feeling the day after the last time I was fired years ago. I remember feeling very grateful, feeling like, wow, I really have I've learned a really nice lesson, and I can see the value that this is going to have going forward, that I know what it's like to lose a job, to be fired. I'm now reconnected with a sense of my own humility, with my own temporality, so I know I can work harder, I can try harder, I can do things, but I can also be prepared to let go of something in the future because I know what it's like. I mean, there's just a cascade of lessons that I still carry to this day from that experience. And I remember hearing Anna Wintour say this once. She said that if you have never been fired, then you've probably had a very boring career, and it probably means that you don't have very strong opinions, or maybe your principles are a little bit weak or something like that maybe you never stood up for yourself or something. When someone has been fired, they usually at least have an interesting story.
No, I think everyone should be fired. Have you ever been fired?
I have been fired,
yes,
yeah, I got fired.
It's character building.
Yeah.
And very often the most creative, outstanding people who become leaders and those kind of things, they get fired a lot of the times because maybe they need to be in order to be set on their correct course. And also, if you are someone who's disruptive and who is innovative and a pioneer in any way, very likely you're going to be at odds with some status quo. So getting fired is actually right on track, usually. But of course, if you're like a lazy ass and you keep getting fired, then you need to sort that out. When one is involved in the affairs of a warrior, such as being a kaishaku, or making an arrest within one's own clan or group, people will notice when the time comes if he has resolved beforehand that no one can take his place. One should always take the attitude of standing above others in martial valor, always feel that he is inferior to no one, and always cultivate his courage. When on the battlefield, if you try not to let others take the lead and have the sole intention of breaking into the enemy lines, then you will not fall behind others, and you will manifest martial valor. Furthermore, if you are slain in battle, you should be resolved to have your corpse facing the enemy. You know, Yamamoto loved death, and but maybe this isn't so much about him loving death, but having a resolve. Again, we see this very consistent thread of living as though you're already dead. So having this prior resolve, and actually, to me, the best thing that I've extracted from that thread is this idea of prior resolve. That in prior resolution, when the time comes, or in the moment, or whatever, he's always talking about this moment. When that moment happens, your prior resolution to potential death or potential failure will sort of steel you up and allow you to face it head on and perform at your utmost. And even as he's just saying right now, adding in this sense of no one is above me, no one can outshine me at all, which I don't think is about hubris. I think that is a technique, because he says one should always feel that he's inferior to no one and always cultivate his courage. When on the battlefield, if you try not to let others take the lead and have the sole intention of breaking into the enemy lines, then you will not fall behind others. I think he's saying when you are in the heat of the moment, maybe you're involved in something that's highly competitive, or maybe you're just hit with one of life's sudden calamities where you have to go into fight or flight mode or something like that. If you can fix your goal to being the first to charge in, the first to break through the enemy lines, then you won't fall behind. I think that's really the key to this whole thing. Then you won't fall behind. So he's not saying that you will be the first to break through the enemy lines, but if you're trying to be the first, you're not likely to be the last. And I think that's where the technique is. When going after a goal that is really, really challenging, if you aim for the superlative of that goal, then you may or may not reach it, but you're very likely to not fail at it. And speaking of technique, try out that 7 breaths thing. Like whenever you have a decision to make, give yourself 7 breaths or whatever the equivalent of that is, and let me know how it works.